Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome one, welcome all to the Shakespeare Show. I am, of course, your host, Shakespeare, and welcome in. I'm glad that you could all make it today. So, as you can see, today we're going to be talking about the International Court of Justice, which gave its judgment for the provisional measures that would be, given if it was found that there might be a chance that Israel is committing, right, certain crimes, including the crime of all crimes. So, it's going to be something. It's going to be interesting today. So first, one thing I wanted to sort of go over is, for today, I actually wanted to not only go over, particulars or about the case, but I did also want to go a bit more in depth about sort of the history. Hello, Zayde. Welcome in. Welcome in. I'm glad that you like the new emojis. So we're going to be looking at other things, right? In particular, like what are the next steps? But also, I want to really bring in, my expertise when it comes to this topic in particular, to sort of, answer any questions people might have, but also to sort of explore kind of what is the sort of precedent that has been set prior, and also, and this is what I think is really important here, is to understand how the fact that what was, judged, what was in the judgment today, means vis-a-vis, the need for us to archive and the need for us to, keep an eye on, any of the erasure, right, and the denial, right, that's also part of this crime. But it should be a way to raise our awareness, right, but to also bring immense attention to the fact that we need to not allow this to be, the court was never going to give us everything that, not even us, like the Palestinians, what they need. However, you do have what was given down, and that's what we're going to focus on for today, as well as other things. Worry not, worry not. Hello, FLFNF. Welcome in, welcome in. It's so good to see you. So we're going to be going over that, and then we're going to be going into some of the other stuff. So I thought we would just watch a quick summary first, right? But first, I also want to say, and I want to make a point to say this: the only real conclusion that we could have, the only true justice that we could ever hope for, is for a free Palestine. And so, obviously, this falls well short of that. But again, it should not deter us from our support of Palestine. So that's one thing I want to keep in mind. But starting with DW.
Brought by South Africa, which accuses Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The court said that Israel must do more to protect civilians there, but did not grant South Africa's request for a ceasefire. The full case is expected to take years before a final ruling.
So, yes, it's going to take years before a final ruling is done. However, now that there have been, by even giving South Africa any of the measures that it wanted, it means that now Israel is on trial for the crime of, for war crimes and obviously the crime of crimes, genocide. So it is no longer inaccurate or anything like that to say that it is committing that crime, because the world's highest court, right, said that there is reason to believe that it is occurring. So, the people, like, that's why a lot of the media apparatus, particularly when it came from like the Israelis themselves, but also in the United States, immediately went for the, well, the ICJ, blah, blah, blah. Like, had they not given South Africa anything, then they would have said, see, the ICJ is the fairest, blah, 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 right? Because again, it works as an organ of Western imperialism, right? That's what it functions as. So the fact that even that court could not reasonably, right, do away with everything and had to say, yes, there are certain things that are beyond the pale that we have to admit, says a lot. Right. So now the people that said, oh, you shouldn't use that word or blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, now we've reached a threshold with the highest legal authority, right? With the most experienced legal scholars, so again, in the liberal sense, right? Since liberals tend to like bureaucracy and apparatuses and stuff like that, right? Like this kind of does away with all of their arguments of, sticking to a more denotative as opposed to a connotative aspect of the term genocide, right? So
Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The court further considers that Israel must take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israel must also take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention.
This, to me, was honestly the provision that kind of stood out to me quite a lot, because it kind of, like, in a sense, it's saying, or rather, it can be interpreted, right, that it's saying that Israel has to preserve them, right, because if they don't, then they will go against the provision. But then that also shows that they're engaging in denial, right, that it's state-sanctioned genocide denial. And that's what I think is, on one hand, right, important to keep in mind, but also the fact that the court even had to say that. Sorry for the ignorant question, but what happens if Israel does not do this? If it does not comply, right, then it goes towards the case of South Africa to say that it was a genocide, right? Like, if it shows that they did destroy those things, that they didn't keep those things, then it goes into the full scope of the case. Because, like, when determining intent, it's not just like, oh, you have to go do X, right? It's like they get to consider the entire thing. And this, right, which is something that Israel does a lot, is something that goes into this, right? So by saying you need to keep the evidence, though, that means that if they do get rid of it, hello, Kievit, I'm doing well. How are you? So if they don't do that, then that goes to South Africa's case is the main part, right? Because it shows that it shows intent, right? That they want to hide the fact that they were, doing something wrong. But like a lot of people said, oh, like I understand that, we this court fell so short of what, if we lived in a just world would be worthwhile. But the fact that they did note that, the fact that they said, you cannot destroy things like that, means that they are aware of the fact that, to some extent, that Israel would do that, right? And that, again, adds, as I said before, to their intent, but also means that I'm fine reading a concise history about Russia now. Okay. Have you ever read the book? It comes from, I want to say Picador Press. It's called The Story of Russia. I thought it was pretty good. Also trying to dive into political philosophy. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, like that's really good, actually. That's interesting, too, because I was going to talk about this later today. But one of the things I did want to talk about is, like, when it comes to, like, approaching particular things, like, for example, genocide studies, right? it's always been very open to different approaches, right? And it just depends on whether you are looking at, right, like individuals or structures, or so a lot of like philosophy and critical theory and such, definitely influences the other side for sure. I've been reading about Gramsci, Louis Althusser, Frankfurt School of Foucault. Nice. Definitely, I always recommend people read Minima Moralia by Adorno. Like if they're getting into that, I think it's a really interesting text to read. And it actually reads really quick for an Adorno text, in my opinion. And also Instrumental Reason, or A Critique of Instrumental Reason by Horkheimer. That one is really, really good, actually.
Against members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip.
And let's get more. We are joined by DW's Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem. So what's the reaction in Israel?
Well, there just has been a statement now. It's a Friday afternoon. The country goes into the weekend. So we've been just hearing from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He gave a statement. So let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas.
Well, he also spoke about that Israel will continue to provide or make it possible for humanitarian.
Like this here, right? Like the whole thing about, trust me, I despise, many people. No, but yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, Mamsie. Is that like when he's saying that, right? When he's talking about self-defense, that is not a defense against the crime that they have essentially been indicted for, right? So to speak, right? Like that's essentially what this functions as, sort of, is like an indictment. At least, again, it's not exactly that because, it's trying the country, not a person. But one of the things that is important to also think is like by saying, well, it's self-defense, well, it's all these things. That is not an excuse, even by the very narrow provisions of the conventions themselves. First, drafted in 48, fully promulgated in 51, etc. Like that is not a defense. Like in fact, no one even has to perish for you to be guilty of the crime. So that's why like them kind of being very. What do you think about E.P. Thompson? Can you give me a couple of titles? Because I'm not sure if I can remember E.P. Thompson right now off the top of my head. Also, in a sense, weaponizing the eve of Holocaust remembrance for sympathy to justify. I know, right? It is disgusting. And in fact, I saw this earlier on Twitter, and I might pull it up in just a second, that the people, I think it was at the Making of the English. Oh, yes. Yeah, E.P. Thompson is good. That one is good too, The English Working Class, especially if you read it with Marx's text too. I mean, obviously he's building off of Marx, but I've always found like Marx is more like historical, and he tries to go into historical aspects that those go really well with The Making of the English Working Class. And also, let's see here. Hi, Buffy. Welcome in. Mamsie, as I was saying, one thing that they did is, I believe this was at the UN. I don't know if it was at The Hague. It might have been, but they actually had, they actually showed, it might have been at The Hague having like a little, the Star of David, right? Like the one that from the Holocaust, right? They had that pinned on them, right? Like a yellow star with it saying October 7th. And I'm like, that is literally desecrating the memory of the Holocaust. Like that's actually desecrating it, not the fact that this is the day that the judgment was given and the fact that a judgment was given, right? it's you have people doing something that is literally horrific and offensive to myself as a Jewish person. Like, I don't want to see, like, I'd like, that is the last thing that anybody should ever think of doing, let alone having people that are paid, 6-figure salaries to just, you know, eat hot chip and lie, but like literally though, right? Like, that's what they literally do. And, to wear something like that is to really make it really, in my view, offends the memory of the Holocaust. Again, that's just my own opinion as a Jewish person. You can disagree with me, etc., but that's just on my own. I think reading a lot of stuff has been inspiring to me. IDK, if I want to continue doing pre-modern history, became reading it really interesting in the history of ideas and how historical contingency influences our dominant mode of thinking, especially ideas of progress. Even though a lot of academics are aware of this, they still ask questions that have it embedded in them. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like, that's one of the major things that happens with like liberal idealism, right? It's like liberalism never can get away from it, right? So like, it always has to think of it in a, like, again, that there's like, trying to think, like, this doesn't fit exactly with this, but the book Racecraft is something that I think for like someone who's thinking about going into more like modern history stuff like that is pretty good. Sort of gets into like intersectionality questions and questions the idea of progress too, right? That's one I would recommend. Trying to think, there's also like The Political Economy of Nationalism. That one's really good. That one is good too if you want to get like a kind of like the history of ideas type of thing, because it's an economic history of nationalism, right? So you definitely get a good amount of like secondary sources and also a springboard, right, for other ideas. I can't think of anything else right this second, but those are the two that come to mind: Racecraft and then the economic history, or the political economy of nationalism. It's really good.
Humanitarian aid, but he said in this statement, that it was the charge was rejected. That is certainly not what most people would read into it. Of course, the ICJ has stopped short of ordering provisional measures pertaining to a ceasefire, but it has said it's seen merits in the case. So this case will continue. Of course, this could take many years for a final ruling, but it has ordered Israel to implement provisional measures, among them.
So when she says that this will take years, I've mentioned this already, right? For the ICJ, this takes years, right? The other court, right, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, it could give back a verdict much faster, even within a year, technically. But the current chief prosecutor is kind of like dragging his heels, right? He's like not moving forward with the investigation. Like, it's open, right? It's an open investigation that was started by Palestine, right? Or rather, I should say, there is a problem though that with the fact that the chief prosecutor, again, is not really giving it the full weight that it should have. Like the investigation should, if anything, be going more in depth right now, particularly because they already have, people that have documentation and, archives of stuff that happened prior to this. Right, in terms of like 2014, 2006, 2007, 2002, etc. So there's already a lot of evidence, even going back to 1947. But more generally speaking, there needs to be a sort of understanding by the ICC that it needs to like hurry up, right? Like, I mean, essentially that's what I want to say. It needs to hurry up. It has a lot of people that are outside of Palestine right now, but that are more than willing to testify, experts, etc., But if it doesn't start its full investigation, then, it causes big issues. The other thing, and I mentioned this on Twitter, was now the General Assembly of the United Nations. So when things are put to the General Assembly, that means that then all of the countries, all of the 193 recognized countries of the United Nations can vote to make something occur, right? Like they cannot just be vetoed by the Security Council, at least ostensibly speaking. At least that's like the ideal, right? One of the things that was suggested is that now the state of Palestine could be integrated in as a full member of the United Nations. And then, once that happens, then they could, the General Assembly could ask for an ad hoc court to be, ad hoc tribunal rather, to be started. So what does this mean for, like, what does this actually mean? So we're talking about a little bit about steps, from here. An ad hoc court, which just means for this purpose, like ad hoc for the purpose, is essentially what happened with the trial of like Mladic, right, with Yugoslavia. So this one could actually try individuals like Netanyahu, like Bezalel Smotrich, like, and it can do it in absentia as well. But essentially, it would also be able to, have its own, discovery process as well. But what I think is most important is that then all of the people that were accomplices, right, even that are not necessarily Israelis, could also be implicated, right? And so then that opens the door for more, right? But of course, this would be in a just world where they could get through with making the ad hoc court, and even bringing in Palestine as a full UN member, which I think at a minimum should be what should happen now. I think it should have happened a long time ago, but I definitely think it should happen now. As for the ad hoc court, again, it could be brought to pass, but do I think that it's going to happen? It's very low. Like, it could happen, but yeah. With political history, we were trying to find out when the state started. I argued that it is pointless because when we ask it, we accept that the state is special. I propose to look at organs, institutions of what we think a state has, and the control of the state has over them, material and immaterial, in the area it claims to be sovereign of. You can use it as a Platonic heuristic framework to study political organizations and look at political organization formation, non-theological right. I mean, again, like we cannot look at the liberal bourgeois state as though it is like a formation in and of itself, right? Like it isn't the state, right? Which, I mean, like that's why a lot of like the bourgeois apparatuses of the state, right, of state power, are seen as being like the very nature of a state in itself, right? When that isn't true. So, yeah, I think that's where like going into the history of particularly of like revolutionary movements, like the early Soviet Union, even like the early Mexican Revolution, even like other revolutions, right, particularly in the early 20th century, right, where you get, or even in the 19th century, but more so in the 20th century, where you actually try to get like power that is not just a recapitulation of the bourgeois state, right? Or, the bourgeois state with extra steps, I think is, also interesting too, historically. But this whole debate showed the whole progress ideal. The state, in my opinion, should be seen as an emic thing. So how people at the time described themselves, right? I mean, like, that's why, like, when Louis XIV says, "L'État c'est moi," like, it doesn't, like, what he thought of a state is different from what, like, Macron thinks is a state, right? So yeah, that definitely tracks for sure.
to ensure, of not killing or causing bodily harm to Palestinians, but also to ensure to provide the basic needs of Palestinians. Now, in the statement, as I said, Prime Minister Netanyahu continues on saying they're doing so, but the question is, will they change course in anything? Will they also comply to another measure it needs to implement to report back to the court in a month's time? There will certainly be more pressure also by Israel's allies so that Israel will comply to these measures. And on the ground, of course, there's also the question now, while Palestinians are saying in reactions at least some accountability when it comes to Israel's actions. Of course, what does it mean for Palestinians in Gaza, for the civilian population there? Will it change anything for them on the ground? And we've been hearing in this hearing, the very detailed description of a very dire situation for Palestinians in Gaza, and with the winter, with the really cold coming into the region, it's still to see what it will change for them right now on the ground.
Tanya Kramer with The View.
Like, another thing too is the fact that it is winter, but like, what does winter mean for the land of Palestine? It means that it's flooding, right? Like even in a Siddur, right? Like a Jewish prayer book, like when it's winter, because there really are only two seasons that exist, right? At least in the Siddurim, is there's summer and then there's winter. So you have the rainy season and it rains a lot. And you had it just earlier today, right? Where even the tents now have been targeted, right? Like even the tent cities that have literally no protection against the elements, nothing, are now, subject to potential targeting, and have been to some extent already. Now you have it where you have it, entire swaths of the land, right? Like completely muddy, right? Impossible to walk through, right? In some places you get flash flooding, in some places, it's still, and this is on top of the fact that there are thousands of people that are quite literally underneath rubble, right? Like that doesn't help them either, let alone the people that have to be in tents and have to sleep on the floor, right? Like this is completely inhumane treatment, let alone the targeting of the tents themselves. But that's another thing to keep in mind, why actually helping as much as you can. And there are some places where you can get deliveries of food and cooking oil into Gaza. Like, in my personal opinion, I wish they didn't have to buy anything. Like, I like when I think like to me, the idea that like they get like restocked so then they can sell is like, I don't think this is a time to be selling stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. In my opinion, I'm just like, why not just, but again, like that's maybe perhaps my own sentiment, right? But, there are there are charities that will like send, cash for them to purchase things. Also will give them fresh food and vegetables, and flour, right? That's a huge thing. Like, I saw something heartbreaking just the other day, where they were taking like what was it, horse meal, or like it was something for pets, right? And they had to grind it down in order to make the flour for bread. Like, that's how desperate the situation is. And I think that on one hand, people really don't understand how desperate it is. But also on the other hand, I think that these exacerbating factors of misery, right? The rains, the wind, the flooding, all of this stuff make it so that it's even more impossible to move around, to do anything, that to feel human, right? In many ways. Like, I can't even imagine being in that situation. And I'm someone that researches, right, that has visited sites of these things and met with people that have suffered from, genocide before, and to like it's so inconceivable to some extent because of just how horrific it is, right? It's just beyond, right? But also at the same time, you think of children, you think of everybody, right? It's not even just everybody that has to be dealing with this misery. And I hate the fact that the court cannot do more, right? I hate that it has no enforcement power. I hate that it's going to take years. I hate that it didn't even call for a ceasefire. Yes, people did say, well, technically speaking, this does mean that that now the state of Israel, essentially, like, the rulings already say that in essence they have to do a ceasefire, but there's so much more that needs to be done, right? Like, the aid that is willing to be sent in is definitely not enough to help, right, people that are desperately in need. And again, that's why, like, when people say, oh, they have to purchase things, I'm like, why should they even have to purchase things, right? Like, at this point, I think if anything, that's just, adding another barrier for people receiving things that they desperately need to survive. Let alone the fact that you already had looting done by the IDF, where they found I think it was like in the Treasury building of Gaza or something like that, where they like, oh, well, we're gonna like reappropriate, something like that. Like, they use some like, legalistic language to be like, oh, well, now we're gonna like steal all of this money, but we're not gonna call it stealing, and like give it to the state of Israel. And it's just like, okay. But I don't know. To me, that's what makes it even just worse.
You from Jerusalem. Thank you so much. And we have the view from Johannesburg, where DW correspondent Diane Hawker is standing by. What's the reaction where you are?
Well, the initial reaction has actually come from South Africa's International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, who was speaking on the steps of The Hague. She went to the court to hear the outcome. And one of the things she said was that she was thankful to the court for dealing with this matter expeditiously. Let's listen to what else she had to say.
I believe that in exercising the order, there would have to be a ceasefire. Without it, the order doesn't actually work. I would have wanted a ceasefire. No way that I'm going to say I'm disappointed. I hoped for it, but the fact of delivering humanitarian aid, the fact of taking measures that reduce the levels of harm against persons who have no role in what Israel is combating, for me, requires a ceasefire.
So that was kind of what I was talking about earlier, that like the foreign minister that kind of had mentioned the fact that, obviously we're disappointed, right? That we didn't, and when I say we, I'm, speaking as it were through her, right? That they did not get the full thing that they asked for. However, what they did ask for essentially requires a ceasefire. Now, I get the logic behind that in some sense, because it's like, well, if you have to give them electricity, water, etc., then, technically you would have to do a ceasefire. But doesn't it also speak to the fact that the Israelis have total control of the situation, right? Like, if anything, this just goes to show how much more dire the situation is for the Palestinians, right? Because if the orders include things that only the state of Israel can do, and that includes potable water, that includes, the allowing of aid to go through Gaza's own border, let alone, everything else, the administration of electricity, of all of this stuff, means that is also saying implicitly, though, right, that Israel has complete control of these aspects of Palestinian society, right? The Palestinian people in Gaza are completely at the mercy of the the state of Israel. And that's one thing that the charges, or rather the provisions, in a way speak to that point, right? Like in a way they can't, because they couldn't say, oh, there's no, proof that this is happening. But what it is being said, in many ways, people can infer so much from it, right? Like why even like if Israel doesn't have all of this control, right, over the lives of Gazans, right, Palestinians in Gaza, then why do you have to have an order in the first place that says, please give them water, please give them electricity, please do these things, right? If Israel is not the party stopping aid from reaching Gaza and reaching the Palestinians in Gaza, why is it then that the ICJ has to tell the state of Israel, please allow humanitarian aid in, right? Like that's the other aspect that, like, for me, when I was reading through, like, earlier this morning, when I was reading through the actual, like, document of everything, that was one of the things that stood out to me. And that's because when I've done my research before on other things, it wasn't what was necessarily being said, but what was implied by what was said, right, that mattered in terms of, like, determining things. Now, obviously, I'm not one of the judges, right? Nor am I on, the South African legal team, right? I'm not one of their researchers for this, trial that's going to take, maybe 4 to 5 years before it even is done. But that speaks to the fact in ways that can be used now legally, but also even by activists, right? That it showcases the fact that even with all of the best researchers, all of the et cetera, even that aspect that Israel would have tried to have, kept trying to, like, pretend that they didn't have complete control over, therefore occupation of, right, did not militarily occupy Gaza, essentially is now shown by that provision. So, like, that is another way forward. Like, and I'm thinking of it in the scholarship route, right? Because again, like, when I write about history and genocide, so, like, when I'm doing this type of work, it's like that's what I would focus on. Like, why would they even need to tell them that if they supposedly don't have that power? That's what I think is really fascinating about the trial, and we are going to watch it, so that way I can, we're not going to watch when they, like, say the whole thing in French, but we're just going to watch the main part to just kind of hear what they do say later, but not right now. But
now, the minister speaking there after her department put out a statement in which it said that the decision at the ICJ was a resounding victory for South Africa. We're also expecting to hear from South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was amongst ANC delegates who were attending an ANC leadership meeting today. We've seen videos on social media showing ANC party members, many of whom are members of government, rejoicing with this outcome, singing struggle songs and saying that this was a resounding victory for the ANC-led government. I think from
somebody on Reddit got upvoted like crazy for posting this video about Biden inviting this woman that was denied an abortion in Texas to the White House, and how that was a good move on him. So I posted, meanwhile, and like, I hate that, like, everything, like, like his whole thing now is like, oh, codify Roe. It's like, bruh, y'all had years, literally decades to do this. You never did anything. Now it's gone, and now you're like, it's your fault. to the people, to the voters, it's your fault that we didn't do anything. Like, that is just messed up, right? Like, that's why I'm just like, I'll put it to you like this, like when get out and vote. Yeah. It's just, Blandon. Yes, Joe Blandon. No, but seriously though, like who even like like who even, like a lot of that is kind of like some people were kind of making fun of it, like the when it's an election cycle, it's like if you don't vote for us, then bad stuff is going to happen. Then it's when they're in power, well, bad stuff is going to happen, but we have to let it happen. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of like now what's happening in Texas, like giving them 24 hours to, like, they're already saying we're not going to respect the 24 hours. Like, it doesn't matter. You're just giving them 24 hours to get more, people up there, right? And then I was reading somewhere that, like, oh, well, that Biden apparently wanted to do this, like, assembly of states thing for the immigration policy or whatever, which is just complete capitulation. Like, complete capitulation to the fascists. I mean, not that he's not one, but still, my point being that, like, the ones that are, like, most openly, trying to harm people, again, that are open about their desire to harm people, I guess, and it's on some level, and sort of saying, like, I will literally not use my executive power to do literally what that executive power is supposed to do. He is the enforcement body of the U.S. government. Like all of this stuff, like waiting for the Supreme Court to do it, or wait, like that is literally unnecessary. He is the commander in arms of everything, of the entire armed forces. He could nationalize, and we already have precedent of this, the National Guards, let alone send them in, let alone send in, right, the people, and just like get, but no, instead we get all of this language of like, well, maybe we should let the states decide if what they think about it. No, we're not going to have a constituent state assembly, right? Like all the states get together and like just decide on what our national immigration policy is going to be. Like, that's literally just idiotic. But anyway, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say, dude. And all Blandon was gonna say is say boom, and Texas is done for. But right, exactly. Like, his whole thing is he is the executive branch, right? Like, like that's his whole thing. Like, same thing with the debt. It was done through the Department of Education. Who does that department work for? Joe Blandon. Literally, like, if he wanted to absolve the debts, he could have done it. Oh no, what? What? Also, didn't he write like a whole book, or like part of a whole book being like, actually guys, rap music isn't music because, if it's not Richard Wagner, like not only is it embarrassing, let alone him playing into, anti-Semitic tropes, but like, that's just, yeah, I can't believe it's real either. Someone even posted a response video. I'm trying to see what it is. Oh, it's that one. Oh, it's that one. I like rotted. Not oh gosh, Hyperspace Fools version, because that one's actually like good. But this is like, literally, the dude said that rap music wasn't even music, and we know why, right? Like, I remember when someone like used that same argument with him, but then like literally said, well, but I'm talking about Gregorian chanting, And then he goes, oh, but that's different because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, because you are racializing a type of music, right? Like, that's why you're saying it's not music. Not because it doesn't follow this supposed paradigm of, like, music, non-musicality, right? Like, it's obvious. Yeah, I can't believe it's real either. Oh my gosh. Play the rest? Okay, fine.
I'm the man who don't respect. Let's look at the stats. I've got the facts.
Oh my gosh. It's so bad. Oh my gosh. It's like beyond cringe. Like, I actually just have to, like, I am actually just like, just my, like, crying emoji. Because that's just so bad. That's just so bad. It's cringe. Yes, it is. It is racist as fuck. And not only that, it's racist, and also it plays. Also, Ben is literally playing into anti-Semitic tropes with what he said. Like, bro, like, could you literally stop? Literally, I swear, like, look, I've mentioned this before. I'm not gonna go into detail, but, like, the Shapiros in my family do not get along. I'll just put it like that, okay? And this goes back years, so I'll just put it like that. Because of people like Ben Shapiro, I am convinced we need to remove the liberal democracy and replace it with an authority. What I hate, though, is that he pretends to be like a libertarian, right? Or like, a Republican, like an enlightened Republican. But it's like, bro, you're not. Like, you know, like, you're literally like Otzma Yehudit, right? Like, you're literally just, yeah, he's ultra conservative. I mean, he's a fascist. I mean, I don't see the reason why we, like, at this point, like, literally, covering up for genocide, war crimes, etc. I mean, he's like best friends with Bibi, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, this, and let alone him being very anti-black, particularly because he's from LA, very anti-Mexican too, but just racist in general, right? But he's even and also, again, going back to his weird anti-Semitic stuff, like when he said, I can tell you who is and isn't a real Jew, I'm just going to put this out right there. That is not a good thing to ever have said, right? Like, for him to have said that. Because all it did was just, again, play into more anti-Semitic tropes, which he does so in this video. But also, Britney is also trending. Did she shave her head again? Let's see. Oh my god. This makes me think of like that thing that they were talking about, like how many times during the day do you think about the Roman Empire, whatever? Because like apparently like cis men just like the Roman Empire is their whole personality, which kind of makes sense. Like, like, yeah, but also like now it's like, how many times you think about the Roman Empire and it's like you're actually thinking about this. It's like, you know what? I was definitely for Emperor Beyonce. 1000%. Like, favorite empress.
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise, playing in the street, gonna be a big man someday. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace, kicking your can all over the place, singing, we will rock you. I said, we will rock you. Oh yeah, buddy, you're a young man, hard man, fighting in the street, gonna take on the world someday.
This is like literally better than like every halftime show that like people pay like what is it now, like $80,000 to just watch the halftime show like in person. Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Zira. 14 months. Oh my gosh, can't believe it. 14 months. Wow. Thank you so much, Zira, for your subscription. I really appreciate it. It's so dumb. I love it. Yeah, I've been studying the Weimar Republic with all its institutions and the rise of been comparing in his work with Oh, have you ever read Oh, thank you for letting me know. So, yeah, what I was gonna say is, have you read The Concept of the Political by Carl Schmitt? Because I think that would really help you if you're gonna talk about Weimar. Okay, good. That would really help in a discussion about Weimar, I would say. But, that's just another suggestion. Because that's where he kind of says, like, oh, you need to, like, not allow people that don't like liberal democracy to be in the parliament, right? Like, I'm reducing it so much, but that's one of the things that kind of, like, comes out in that. So, Oh, it does sound better? Good. I'm glad to hear it. With Carl Schmitt. Yeah, I think to me that like The Concept of the Political is a book that's not really, in fact, if I remember correctly, the edition I have was like the first ever one that was ever fully translated into English. So, I mean, I could look for it, but I'll have to go away for like a couple of minutes to find it. But yeah, it's just called The Concept of the Political, and it's pretty, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. Let's see here. Oh my gosh. Let's see here. What's this?
Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The International Court of Justice, the UN's highest court, has found a plausible risk Israel's committing genocide in Gaza and ordered provisional measures, but stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. This is the president of the court, Joan Donoghue, reading out the vote of part of the ruling.
By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular.
Like, okay, so one of the things too, now thinking about it, is the voting, right? Like, because, right, the judges, you can have a dissenting opinion. Even the Israeli judge, right, that like, so when they do these, they put 2 ad hoc judges, right, one from each party, so then that way they can have input from both sides. Even the Israeli judge, even he did not vote no against all of the charges. Even he said on one, he actually said, yeah, Israel does have to do that, which says so much, because it's the one saying you need to stop saying, like promoting and saying genocidal things, right? Like the one where you need to punish that stuff and you need to, etc. The fact that even the Israeli judge couldn't say no to that says so much, at least to me. Like, wow, that means like it's really bad, right? It's far more worse than people can think. Like again, when it comes to like the Hebrew media, like I'm not even like kidding when I say like the way how they describe people that are sympathetic to Palestinians as like, I don't know, like it's literally just like language that is just racializing, right? So it's racializing and also just horrific. What I see is similar is that people on the verge of what is acceptable start yelling these radical things, so it gets normalized. Eventually, these people organize themselves, and due to socioeconomic change, they draw away the electorate from established parties, so you get a co-opting strategy, and established parties start to copy the main thing. That the radical fringe of the party keeps them in power. At that point, the discourse is infected. Well, right, and there's also the fact that, you know, the reactionary nature, particularly of the United States, has never like gone away, right? Like, so there's also that aspect too, that like after the fall of the Soviet Union, suddenly you start to get, you know, these things that become more plainly imperialistic and you know, not that they didn't exist before, right? So this happened with the German Conservative Party copying the mitigating in Tivoli, okay. The VVD, which is a liberal party, did the same thing with the new elections but failed. So they legitimized Geert Wildert from, yes, right. And so, yeah, that is an immense problem, because like there were protests against, you know, the Alternative für Deutschland, but they still control 20% of the parliament. So, like, what do you do when they're literally like the largest party, and they have, like, you know, they're also the majority in 3 states of, you know, Bundesländer in Germany? Like, what do you do then? Right? It's like, it's, you know, you people, like, they don't want to ban them, right? I also blame Paul von Hindenburg. Well, I mean, there's also Schleicher, right? Like, you also have to look at Schleicher and von Papen, right? Like, I mean, there's a reason why von Papen was also brought to Nuremberg to be tried, right? I mean, he wasn't held as guilty as the other people, right? But he was also responsible as well, you know, to a great extent. I mean, definitely far less than, you know, but Schleicher by far is the person that, you know, if it wasn't for his, like, orchestrations, which, I mean, even his surname, Schleicher, means to, like, to creep in German, right? It means to, like, to sneak around. And, like, schleichen, right? And so that is something that needs to be, I guess, talked about a bit more, because people focus on Paul von Hindenburg because, yes, he was the president and gave, you know, had the Enabling Act done, but it was von Papen's, you know, incompetence plus other things, right? Like his failure at, you know, all these other things. Scheiße. Yeah. From my understanding, von Hindenburg was not senile, and he screwed with the election cycle to get right back to his electorate, since the left started to vote for him to not have Hitler in power. Well, I mean, I guess if you include, like, the Sozialdemokratie Partei von Deutschland, then I guess, yes, technically, yes, the left. But yeah, like you know, like the communist, the KPD was the largest party in the Reichstag, but then they got kicked out, right? So it's like if they would have done it according to Carl Schmitt, which again, at least ideally, then they would have gotten rid of both the Nazis, and, you know, at least again in the liberal sense, right? I'm saying ideally, like liberal idealism. They would have gotten rid of both parties, right? Not just one. Because by getting rid of one, then that makes everything far, far more right-wing than, you know, it would have otherwise have been. And that's one of the reasons why the Nazis never won a full majority. Like, even with the communists kicked out of the Reichstag. Hence the need for the Reichstag fire, right? So, was the SPD support of Hindenburg official? Yes, because they entered into coalition with the more conservative parties. So, like, that's why. Like, otherwise Hindenburg couldn't have been granted the presidency otherwise. Because like if you can't have a government like the conservative government in the first place, then Hindenburg wouldn't have become president, because that would have had to have been done by his party and then voted by the Reichstag and then him put into power. But so yeah, the problem was because the institutions, especially the judges and the military, were loyal to the abstract Reich. Well, I mean, they were loyal to the Second Reich, not necessarily to the third one, but the concept of the Reichen, saw Weimar as illegitimate, a shame they could not rebuild into the institutions, but inherited from the Second Reich. Right, which a documentary I did want to watch on stream was talking about how the Second Reich is not like better than the third one, right? Like it's not as though it's like, oh, if it would have just stayed, with a German empire, then it would have been okay. Because nothing bad ever happened with it, right? It talks about like Namibia, right? With the Nama and the Herero genocides as well. Because again, they're not really talked about at all. And this was brought up especially because Germany was one of 3 countries, the other 2 being the United States and the United Kingdom, that sided with Israel against South Africa. And so Namibia said that they would be taking Germany to the International Court of Justice as well, because they essentially were doing genocide denial by doing that. Because they never formally apologized. In fact, the Germans not only did not formally apologize, but they even said they were going to start a process to find a way to apologize so that they are apologizing without admitting like culpability. Like just think about, like imagine that, like literally saying, well, we will apologize, but we have to say it in a way that doesn't implicate us legally. Like imagine that's your I don't know. To me, that's just like ridiculous. But yeah, Karl Peters, yeah.
A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. And D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group.
Over a 1-hour ruling, the International Court of Justice President Joan Donoghue in The Hague quoted Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, saying that as the war got underway, Gallant had said, "We have removed all restraints. We will eliminate everything."
Of course.
Referring
Always
to
here for you.
Palestinians as animals. Judge Donoghue continued. Gallant went on to describe Hamas as comparable to the Islamic State. After proceedings concluded today, the South African government said it welcomed the ICJ's decision. We're continuing with our guests right now. Diana Buttu, Palestinian human rights attorney in Haifa, Israel. Raz Siegel, Israeli historian and professor.
Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry. I was, like that art piece that she has behind. I love like stuff like that.
Of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Stockton University, joining us from Philadelphia, and Mahmoud Mamdani, professor of government at Columbia University, specializing in the study of colonialism. Diana Buttu, if you can talk about what exactly the timetable is right now and the true level of enforcement that the ICJ or even the United Nations overall has. Go back to, using as a reference, your involvement with the 2004 decision, where the ICJ ruled the separation wall that Israel built in the occupied territories illegal. Well,
Thank you so much, Anita. I appreciate it.
Let's first start with this particular case. I think it's important to keep in mind that just last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that nothing is going to stop him, not the ICJ, not The Hague, nobody is going to stop him, and that he's going to continue to pursue ahead. And of course, the reason he's doing this is in part because he is genocidal, and in large.
See, like, I like Diana because she just says like exactly what it is. Like, yeah, the reason why he's saying that is because he's fucking genocidal. Okay, like, what else do you want me to say? Right, like she lives in Israel, right? Like she lives in Haifa, like a city that for a long time was like, like it's sometimes compared to San Francisco, like culturally, I guess, in some aspect, because it's like more there's so many different cultures there, etc., and also like weather-wise, I guess, to some extent, and also because it's like sort of shaped like San Francisco, I guess, but like Diana, like I've seen her stuff, like both they're being interviewed but also written stuff too, and this is one thing that I just always appreciate is this, like, yeah, the reason why he's saying that is because he's genocidal. Like I don't get what people don't understand. Like they're saying, oh, he's just like blah blah. It's like, why, like that. This is kind of also how I like when it comes to these things, right? Like, because historians don't care about like, oh, well, the law says that it's like, so what? Like people break the law all the time. Murder is illegal. People murder all the fucking time, right? Like kind of like how. I mean, technically, you're not supposed to, like cops are not supposed to, do X, Y, Z. They still fucking do it, and they get away with it because they're fucking cops, So, like, in this way, like, this is such a mood. Like, Diana is completely mood right now.
Part because he knows ICJ, not The Hague, nobody is going to stop him, and that he's going to continue to pursue ahead. And of course, the reason he's doing this is in part because he is genocidal, and in large part because he knows that the minute that the attacks on Gaza are over, that his term in office is also over because of the internal dissent inside Israel. And the reason that this is important is because we haven't heard yet what they've said, but judging by that, it means that they're going to ignore this ruling. And if they ignore this ruling, it then becomes imperative upon the member states to take this decision to the UN Security Council to have the ruling enforced at the Security Council level. And it becomes really a question of whether the United States is going to veto or abstain or what exactly it's going to do.
Yeah, no, that's exactly like a lot of the thing. Is like the only thing that you can do with this judgment at this point is like, or the only thing you can do right now is go to the UN Security Council and ask them to enforce it, because they are the enforcement body, right? Like, but of course, it has technically all 5 of the countries on there have no problem with Israel doing what it's doing, but ostensibly speaking, 3 of them have no problem, like would immediately want to veto. Maybe France would like abstain, maybe, but the British and the Americans, that they're going to veto that. Like they're going to be like, of course not, right? Russia and China, like they might vote against, they might vote to like uphold it, but again, if it gets vetoed by the other 2, right, or by the other 3, then it doesn't do anything, right? Like China might abstain. Yeah, China might abstain, right? Like it's like this is the one thing that, like, again, is just one of those, like, yeah, given how centrist they are. Yeah, well, I mean, like centrist is an interesting way to put it. Also, by the way, I'm just putting this out there. If you'd like to support me, you can always do so by subscribing to my channel, which costs $5 a month you don't have to deal with ads and all of that stuff. You can also go to my Linktree, which is currently pinned, is the pinned chat here, and you can find different ways to support me if you would like to. Also, if you'd like to support my research, you could always go to mythrone.me/Shakespeare and help me by sponsoring one of the books for my research. But there are also fun gifts on there too. There is Israel's biggest trading partner. I mean, even one of the like things for the what's it called? The new Silk Road project. I don't know why I can't remember what it's called right now, but one of them involves having to go through it involves having to have Belt and Road. There we go. The Belt and Road Initiative. It involves them having to like build like stuff all the way to the port of Haifa and then go out from there. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but at the same time, it's like, well, it also makes sense because, to be fair, they might be pressured by Iran Gulf states while the monarchies don't care about Palestinians. The population is deeply disturbed. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, that's exactly the thing, right? Like, the reason why they are so adamant on, closening or warming, as they might say, ties with Israel is because then that also lets them have, more weapons, more, ways to survey and control the population, etc. Because the thing that they're most afraid of is literally being overthrown, like almost happened in Bahrain, remember, in 2011. So Saudi Arabia and the other monarchies didn't even join. Yeah, only Bahrain, right. And that is because, of course, Bahrain is where the big base of operations is in the Persian Gulf. So that's one of the reasons. Also because their monarchy is like completely just, chosen by the British to rule, essentially, and then protected by the Americans because they let them do whatever they want, like have a huge base on Bahrain. But in this case, it's like that's why they're more than willing to, open up relations with Israel, let alone the United States, to do whatever the United States says, because that lets them remain, right, have that power, right, that it's like, oh, well, we can always call the United States. I forgot what I just watched earlier, but it was something about how one of the ways some building blew up had to be planted explosives and not a rocket / missile. Oh, you mean in Gaza? Yes. Well, we do know, the one I know for particular was that Israeli commandos, I guess, put explosives in a building. Then, because we're using tank mines, right? And then because some people from Hamas were, found out about it, that's why they were able to get over 20 people, over 20 IDF soldiers at once. Yes, Hamas. Because of that, that's why that one day was super high, amount of people that perished, because they discovered that they were putting bombs into the thing. They shot an RPG at them while setting up the mine, killing 20 plus of them. Exactly. And so literally it was because they were oh, they're never going to do anything and we're going to destroy this big old building. And they were they literally just, yeah. I do have the soundboard, but I feel like the one I have that makes the bombs, it's so loud, and I don't know, I don't know how to even oh, here, let me turn it down. I'll put it to 40%. Right. So that's essentially what happened, right? And that is, what it is. So yeah, that's why we know for a fact, because then they had to admit that that's what they did, right? Let alone and I know I saw you watching this yesterday, Anita, the things that they're making, the bombs that they're making, where it's it looks like a tin can, right? With food in it. And they're but they're actually if you open it, it explodes right in your face. I'm that is also showing that what they're doing is fucked up. You know what I mean? They're literally doing something precisely because they know that the people are starving. That's what they're doing. Even this thing, which they think, oh, look at blah, 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 does this thing. It also shows what they're doing, right? So, yeah, there's that too.
Tell you in terms of what happened in 2004. 2004 was a very different case. It was an advisory opinion. It wasn't a case of the same type. And in 2004, Israel took the exact same position, that it wasn't going to stop the construction of the wall. In fact, it accelerated it. And but part of the decision indicated that there are other states third states, other countries that are also obliged to make sure that Israel upholds international law. And that was the part that where the world failed. And out of that, this is where we saw the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, ended up being recreated or reconstituted on the 1-year anniversary of the ICJ ruling, so in 2005. And the reason that
Palestinians are also so brave. They'll go right next to IOF tanks and set the explosive from such a close distance. The tank active armor don't work properly. Right. And I mean, I've even seen it where like it's been like I've even seen it too where it's essentially like where like, you know, the video where they did, because they have like GoPros, right, or something like that on their like somewhere like on their heads, right, and they were like right in the middle of like an IOF like camp essentially, right, and they were just right there and like showing people like eating, dancing, right, like I was like, wow, that's just like, I don't even know what to say about that. That's just like beyond like, wow, that's intense. There are old videos from the West Bank where children sit on top of tanks and throwing rocks. Oh, yeah. like, I mean, it's really fascinating to me how, like, still one of the big, like, quote-unquote threats that the IDF has in the West Bank is literally kids throwing rocks at them. And they always try to, like, you know, use it to say, like, oh, see, this proves, blah, blah, blah. But it's like even people that have never grown up there will immediately like do things like that because they see how horrible they are being treated, let alone how other people like Palestinians are being treated, right? Like it's just like you know, but again, that also goes to speak to the fact that, you know, in the West Bank you have the collaborationists, you know, PLO, that, you know, was more than willing to disarm Palestinians in the West Bank and to allow Israel to enforce its, you know, rulings and such in the West Bank. So, you know, there's a big problem with that. But then, you know, you do have the rise of some militant movements, though, like the Lion's Den, right, in Jenin, which is literally, Jenin is like is now infamous, I guess, because that was where the like story of the man who was in the wheelchair with the white flag that met his end due to the IDF shooting at him. Like that's what it became known for. And so that's, you know, the fact that that's still the refugee camp that like Israel continually goes, right? I didn't know that the Palestinian Authority was the PLO after Arafat. Yeah, it was. Like, like after 2002, it started to veer that direction. Although there were definitely signs of it before. One thing, though, that the IOF did try to do, like this is why the fact that they are supposedly like, I read this just like on, you know, a news source on Twitter, like it was just like a developing story. So I don't have all of the, you know, facts before me yet. But what they did say is that it seems that Israel has said that they are preparing for war with Lebanon. Now, one of the things that the ICJ, right, the International Court of Justice, said Israel has to do is to preserve documents, right, to preserve evidence, right? Israel has a history of trying to destroy records by, you know, particularly the PLO, because they used to have a research institute in Beirut. They used to have one. Like, I can't remember its name right now because it changed its name like 3 times. But like one of the things when the IDF was actually in Beirut, right, was actually there, you know, when Sabra and Shatila happened, right? Which, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, that like Lebanon, let alone Palestine, should take Israel to the ICJ for that, because that's like Srebrenica, right? Like that's very close to what happened in Srebrenica, but but regardless, that is the other aspect too, that Israel has a history of trying to destroy documentation, records, all of this stuff, even when it comes, particularly when it comes to the Palestinians, even research, like their history, things like that. That is stuff that they are more than willing to try to erase. So again, that's why for people that, like that's why there's like an archive project on Twitter or something like that that's trying to like save tweets and everything else, but also with physical documents, with books, with all these other things, like, to get them scanned, to get them protected, etc. That's going to be so important because, again, I'm not expecting anything to come out of the trial. Like, I'm not expecting miracles, but putting up all of the stuff and putting it on the record means that, at least on one sense, you can't deny it. I had a hot take yesterday that Israel would take out the whole area of Arabian Peninsula if it could. I mean, on one hand, I will say that at the heart of I see the news here. Hezbollah has stuck an air traffic control base in northern Israel. Yeah, Israel warns of another war as cross-border fighting with Hezbollah escalates. So, yeah, so at the heart of Likud's ideology, right, of the party that, let alone Otzma Yehudi, let alone, Bezalel, Bateinu, or Habet Yehudi, regardless of the political parties, right, the main one that's kind of like, is Jabotinsky's revisionist Zionism. Now, what this is, very simply, is the belief that even a land on the other side of the Jordan, right, which was at one point called Transjordan, and that is why in Spanish and in French, also in Italian, right, the way how you say like the West Bank is Cisjordania, literally Cisjordan. So there's Cisjordan and Transjordan. So Jabotinsky's whole thing is, yes, we would literally take also the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, or Transjordan as it was called then. Then there are the people that are like, want to believe that Israel can colonize, everything from this point to this point on the map, right? From this river to this river, because of, like the irredentism, the colonial nature, it just shows itself over and over. Otherwise, why would it even have those? You know what I mean? Like if that's what proves it's not a decolonial movement, because it only seeks to colonize. It doesn't seek to liberate. It seeks to colonize. And the justifications are the exact same ones as colonial powers. It's not, them actually trying to look for liberation. I recently found out that Egypt is the second largest receiver of U.S. military aid. Well, I mean, one of the reasons why that is the case is because, again, is because both of those two, like Israel and Egypt, make sure that U.S. hegemony of the Middle East is kept, right? Like, I mean, that's why like Israel is what it is, because it's essentially a huge, aircraft carrier, right? Like huge thing like that in the middle of, that part of the world. And Britain has, the parts of Cyprus that it declared its own, right, when it, gave it independence. So, you have that as well, right? Like they're just military bases, but country-sized ones, right? I believe that Jordan should also be part of Palestine when the Hashemites fail. I mean, again, like that, like if Jordan and Palestine wanted to become one state, like if that's something, because so many Palestinians live in Jordan, And because, I mean, even Queen Rania, or Rania, some people put the emphasis at the end, some people put it in the beginning. Rania, like, who is also Palestinian, if that was what they wanted, then I would say fine. Like, again, like I could see it happening, because again, there's just, but who knows? No, yeah. No. I know that it became a thing when they drew the line from the bottom of the Dead Sea down to the Gulf of Aqaba, right? But like, my point is, like, that's for the Palestinians to decide, right? Like, but I totally get what you mean. I'm just trying to be like, Israel is more or less the 51st state of America. I mean, I think, to me, it's actually like, if they could, the United States would make it a state, as opposed to Puerto Rico. Like, like Puerto Rico is like never going to become a state, right? It's always going to be in this like colonial limbo. And that's exactly because, one, it's not majority Anglo-white state, but also most of the people that live there are, again, colonized people that want liberation. So, like, the fact that there is that, but also it gives them, more power in the Caribbean. Hello, Boy Meets Minnie. Welcome in. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, this keffiyeh is actually from Palestine. So I wanted to make sure to wear it today. So, because it has the colors of the flag too. Wassalamu alaikum. LA County fam. I mean, yes, literally. But yeah, like, yeah. Oh, I remember when Anthony Bourdain went to Israel. Have I been there? I have not. The problem I have is this. This is my problem. I refuse to support in any way, right? Like, people have told me, oh, well, BDS has a way of ethically visiting. There's just no way I feel right in visiting Palestine, because it would involve me having to be in the state of Israel, right? Let alone the tourism industry. But I do not want to give anything to the Zionists. Like, that is literally, like I've said before, I don't want them in my house. Like, I just don't. I don't want to deal with that. Like, I'm not going to entertain that. I know many people who are very nice, but when it comes to this one issue, they start to sound like Cecil Rhodes. Let alone other people. We wouldn't even go into that. I just can't. Like, it's just, like it. So, like, the idea of going there, my grandparents always wanted to go, because they were born before the state of Israel was, brought to be, and they always wanted to go visit. But they also couldn't do it for many reasons, financial reasons, etc. But for me, it's always been, I would never feel right being there knowing that the genocide's happening. I mean, like, I don't understand how people can, like, in my view, right? Like, it's like during, like what happened with the Hutus and the Tutsis, to go to Burundi, right? Or rather to go to Rwanda, to go, just hang out in the capital. You can't, you can't do it, in some ways. Of course, I'm using that example because, again, that's one that's already been proven to be a genocide in many ways. But another aspect too is I just don't want to. I just can't. I can't. Like, one day, as I said on Twitter, one day, once Palestine is free, I will go to and honor my grandparents by, saying Kaddish for my grandfather, etc. But until then, hasta la victoria siempre, right? Like, this is something that's going to be going on for a long time, and I will always be on the side of the Palestinians, always. So, yeah, I don't want to give anything, let alone my presence to the Zionists. I just can't. I can't. I kind of feel that way about India too, but I had to see my family after 9 years. Right. And also, I don't know if you saw, but I did DM you or like a while ago, Boy Meets Mini, again asking you a question. It's fine if you know, because I did want to talk about India, but I also don't want to just talk about it right without someone that's actually, you know, has been there, knows the place, right? Because I always find it's like when people talk about Mexico and like they've only been to like to Tijuana. It's like, no, like even as someone from Tijuana, like they don't even know Tijuana, let alone like the rest of Mexico. It pisses me off how many companies support Israel right now too, because you literally can't buy anything or work anywhere, not to mention our own fucking government and president. No, right, exactly. Like that is literally something that makes it very hard. Let alone the fact that they're transphobic as well, right? Queerphobic in every way, and racist, right? Like it's just like if a company is like you know pro, you know, whatever is citing, like you already know that they have everything else is bad, right? Because if they are you know, LGBTQ accepting, then usually it's because it's for pink washing purposes, not because they actually care. And so, you know, that's usually a problem as well. But yes, it is very difficult indeed. Yeah, I do understand. I think I would still go because I studied Christianity and Byzantium for a long time. Oh, nice. I would like to see the Dome of the Rock, Byzantine artisans, and the Holy Sepulchre. Yeah, I've always found it really interesting to me how, like, the Dome of the Rock, like the current dome we see now, is actually a very recent addition. Like, it used to not be golden. It used to be dark. Like, if you look at the one at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that's how it used to look. Like, they all used to be the same color. Then they decided to, first they made it copper, and then they made it gold. But regardless. Like, that's why, like, if you look at older paintings that happened, you know, after they made the change, when they draw, like, when you see a painting that shows the Dome of the Rock in the past, you can tell whether it was made after the change or before it, because of the fact that after it, everyone kept painting it with the golden dome, right? Awesome, thank you. But yeah, I would love to go to like Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock, just all over the place. Like, I mean, there's so much there that's important for the Jewish people, let alone everything else, right? You know, because again, I study history myself, and like I would love to visit, you know, many places, but I just cannot do it knowing that it's in any way aiding and abetting what's happening there, right? Like, it's just it's hard for me personally. Again, like, I understand other people go and they might follow the BDS guidelines for ethically traveling to Palestine, but you know, and I know like people like Norman Finkelstein, right? I've even lived in Palestine. Like, he lived outside Ramallah, and then at one point, yeah, I think it was Ramallah. And so, you know, he obviously lived on the other side of the Green Line, but you know, it's just hard. It's just complicated. But I also, the humiliation of going through Israeli airports if you got an Arab name, don't want to go through. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That's why so many people that like were Mizrahim or Arab Jews, as Avi Shlaim, Dr. Avi Shlaim likes to call, like, people that were born in an Arab country and then came to the state of Israel, is like they sometimes would have Arabic names, but then like the main thing to do was to change it immediately, right? Which is something people did in the United States. Like this whole, that's why like the obsession people have in the United States about surnames never made sense to me, because it's so common. You know, I don't want to get into like even further back in history, but like but essentially, like that was super common. People would change their surname all the time. They would anglicize it. Like instead of being Schmidt, it would be Smith. Instead of being, whatever it might be, so let alone at one point there were even policies of what you could name your children, right? Like in France, like before you could only choose French names. That's why for so long you have people that were, for example, very religious Muslims, but they had a very French sounding name because they couldn't name their children Muhammad. They couldn't name their children Fatima. They couldn't name, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's a sad situation in general, but I feel that have one life, but I think it's also important to me. No, I totally understand. Like, I'm not saying that absolutely, if I believe that Palestine will be liberated within my lifetime, and I will see it. And I will be able to honor my grandparents by going. So, again, that is my sincere wish and hope. And yeah. As a Christian, I want to see it too, but not until the Palestinians and the minority are free. Right. Like, again, it just becomes very hard to visit. It's like, about all these places, right? Oh, here you have the Garden of Gethsemane, over there you have Golgotha, over there, you have all these important sites, but then, it's fraught. I'll put it like that. It's fraught with issues. Studying Byzantium, for example, like the Armenian Quarter, right? Like right now, there's a huge campaign by Armenian Christians to stop the colonization, right, and theft of Armenian Christian homes. And I should say, and I've mentioned this before on stream, that's also because the state of Israel has a history of literally destroying quarters in Jerusalem. Well, it destroyed one when they needed to do it, to make the Western Wall plaza in front of the Western Wall, right? And that is, there used to be a quarter there called the Moroccan Quarter, and they bulldozed it away. So like they know that if the state of Israel had the chance, they would do it again because they've done it before. And like when they gave the evacuation order, they didn't go door to door to make sure everybody was out. I'll just put it like that, right? Oh my goodness. Thank you, Boy Meets Mini. Thank you so much for the subscription. I appreciate it. Thank you. Studying Byzantium literally got me out of a depression when I got, I see, and put me on the path of studying history. It would be like a personal. I totally understand that. That's why I know a lot of people that I know that will like go to, that will go to Istanbul or will go to Mount Athos, right? Or, other places in Greece, let alone Jerusalem, right? So I totally get that. Let's see here. I'm an Indian dude with a beard. I just know racists will call me slurs. Especially, yes, again, like that's another thing too. Like even here in Jewish spaces, people don't see me as like, they're equal. They see me as like, you're a Mexican Jew, right? Like that's what they emphasize. They don't care about the secondary part of that, the part that should be the only thing that matters in that space, let's say. Instead, they focus on this thing of difference, right? And so, I think that, sorry.
It came together was because we expected that the world was going to come forward and do something to make sure that the advisory opinion was upheld and enforced, but instead they did nothing. So once again, we will likely see that Israel is going to ignore this ruling. It's then imperative to take it to the UN Security Council. But all the while, it's very important that we continue to boycott Israel, to divest from Israel, and to push for sanctions. That the global BDS movement should be growing at this point to make sure that the age of Israeli impunity finally comes to an end.
Roz Siegel, if you can talk about the aspects of genocide. You write, the crime of genocide has two elements, intention and execution. And what Joan Donoghue, the head of the court, at least for another few weeks, read in terms of the decision for what constitutes genocide and what this means. As an Israeli historian who lives in the United States, while Israel tried to say this doesn't matter, the fact is they participated in this, clearly showing it matters a great deal to them. And also what it means for the United States' support for Israel and what's happening today with this court finding.
Yeah, so I think that it was very important that the court quoted some of the statements of intent. And it's again important to emphasize that we're talking about dozens of statements of intent to destroy Palestinians, intent to destroy in the language of the UN Convention, and by people with what's called an international law command authority, so state leaders, war cabinet ministers, senior army officers. And these statements were made over time, so not just a week or two after the 7th of October Hamas-led attack, but over time, actually until today, when we think about what Prime Minister Netanyahu said on 13th of January, when he said that Israel's attack will continue whatever happens in The Hague, he also reiterated the portrayal of Palestinians as Nazis, for example, right, which is basically a mechanism of dehumanization, a mechanism that portrays all Palestinians in Gaza as legitimate military targets. So these statements of intent.
So I want to just quickly go over something. As I've mentioned before, the whole thing about like what counts as a legitimate target, well, one, civilians never do, and combatants are not permanent. It's not a permanent status, as I've mentioned before. Once you go home, you're no longer a combatant, right? By definition, if you're not actively engaged as a combatant, then you are no longer a combatant. you cease to become one and you become a civilian. That is something that is not talked about at all, even though that is literally in the Geneva Conventions, which come from the 19th century, and again were refined after like the First World War, for example. So one other aspect too is I did want to go over again the concepts from the United Nations Convention that was invoked here, right? So I'm going to read just a very quick bit about the history of this. The original definition was adopted of genocide was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 after 2 years of drafting and redrafting inside the UN bureaucracy. The impetus behind the legalization of the term had come from Cuba, Panama, and India. Okay. In late 1946, these countries introduced a draft resolution in the first meeting of the UN General Assembly that called for the recognition of a crime, peacetime genocide, that developing countries in particular felt had been given short shrift at the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, where the Allies had just sat in judgment over Nazi atrocities. So, imperialized, colonized countries are the people that are the countries that brought forth the idea of even counting it, of even the concept of genocide in the first place. Again, because with the International Tribunal at Nuremberg, whilst that does inform the structure of the International Court of Justice and then, the ad hoc courts that are created after that, it was not the British or the French or et cetera, et cetera. It was not the Americans. It was the Cubans, the Panamanians, and the Indians that literally said, right, crazy how India of all countries proposed this. I'm shocked. Right. Well, I mean, because this is like, like before, this is like in the lead up to its independence, right? And also just after its independence, right? After you have all of those 1946. Yeah, that's when it was proposed, in late 1946. Yeah, India was not independent then. but the observer groups that were at the United Nations, right, still spoke, right? Kind of like how Palestine is not a full member of the United Nations, right? But it's still an observer, right? So it can say something. But yeah. Okay. The Genocide Convention put on legal footing some of Raphael Lemkin's ideas and ignored others, notably what has become known as cultural genocide. Again, this is where like, had they put this in there, like the United States, like the whole idea of like assimilation into like American culture, all of that stuff is literally, you know, like, as much they love to idealize that, like, oh, why don't they behave like us? Why don't they do this? Right? It's like, because that's cultural genocide. Like, you know, it's like, if they want to do this thing, that's fine, but forcing them to do this thing, right? And also putting up razor wire on the border, and fighting over whether or not you get to put, you know, murder buoys in the middle of the Rio Grande. That's a whole, you know, that's not good. That's not good. Hey, India, you guys did this. How about we abolish caste? Modi, no. Hindu, right. Well, I mean, that's another thing is like even the invocation of caste, right? Like a lot of the stuff that's justified because of the caste system, which was, you know, sort of, and again, I want to make sure that I say this, that, you know, historians have sort of written about this. Hi, Moni, welcome in. It's so good to see you. Is that like the way how the current caste system works is because it reflects how the British wanted it to work, right? Like, they made it work for them. And so I think that also speaks a lot to, right, a lot of its, to a lot of historical processes. Yeah, divide and conquer, among many other things too, right? So again, like, this goes into, yeah, we got to talk about it in depth. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's why I really would love to talk about it, because it's really fascinating. In fact, like, in New Spain, in what is now Mexico, to describe a person that wasn't white was literally to say that they are a caste person. They are son casta, literally, like, because we have our, you know, we had our own, you know, system. So, you know, the Genocide Convention put on legal. Oh, yeah, I already went over this. So frequently misunderstood, which is has been shown a lot this past week, especially, definitely by the Israelis too. The first legal definition of genocide fueled discontent in theory and practice alike. Articles 2 and 3 of the convention are the key provisions, right? So the first paragraph of Article 2, which we're going to get to in just a second, known as the chapeau, right, which means the hat, literally means the hat, sets out the mens rea, right? What mens rea literally means, like, evil mind, right? Like in order to commit a crime with intent, you have to have mens rea, right? So something like when people say not guilty for reason of insanity, right? That's a way to negate mens rea, right? Or diminished capacity is the other way to negate mens rea in law, right? Is to say that this person does not comprehend, right from wrong, in the same way that the, you know, liberal ideal person, right, the rational individual would. And so therefore we have to, you know, negate the idea of intent. The remaining paragraphs labeled A to E enumerate the 5 acts punishable under the convention. This is the physical element, or the actus reus. Again, if I were to put the hearing today, which I don't think we're going to watch it because it's not exactly the most interesting of things. Like, it's interesting for me, you know, from a scholarly perspective, but I don't think it's like super necessary to watch the whole thing unless you want to. The physical element, Article 3 is the main one that sets out the different modes of participation, right? I.e. ways in which individuals can do it, such as conspiracy and complicity. This is what's really important here. And describes the form of liability for individuals other than the principal perpetrators. So again, this whole thing here is not going to be a question just of Netanyahu. Like, as much as people want to say, oh, well, Netanyahu he's the one that, they cannot do the whole like, oh, it's all his fault, because even doing that is being an accomplice, right? So the more they do that on Twitter, right? Again, that's why there is that archive project of you send it to them and then they archive it, precisely because they keep literally telling on themselves. They keep self-reporting, saying, well, what's happening in Gaza is one thing, but it's all Netanyahu, right? Like, if it wasn't for him, we would be doing it, XYZ way. Like the difference between murder and manslaughter, I merely meant to severely wound the victim, and I thought he had just, right. Or another thing too is like criminal negligence, right? Where it's like, someone is not doing their job correctly. But like, had they done their job correctly, then reasonably speaking, that thing wouldn't have been, like, that thing could have happened as well, but because it was done for the lack, anyway, I don't want to get all lawyered out right now, because I totally could. But so 2, right? The main thing that the convention did, again, because Cuba, Panama, and India brought it forward, was that they wanted it to also not be restricted solely to wartime. That was the important thing, right? When the Nuremberg trials happened in 1945 against the like main people, right? Like you have like Göring, right? You have also people like in charge of newspapers like the Völkische Beobachter, etc. They did it in the idea of war victors and losers, right? That is exactly what the colonized world said. That is not the only way that you can do a genocide, right? So it's very important that it says here, the contracting parties confirm, which, by the way, any country that sits in the United Nations by definition has signed to this, confirms that genocide, whether committed in a time of peace or a time of war, is a crime under international law, which they undertake to prevent and punish. So this is where the court case against Joe Blandon, to quote Anita, this is where that comes out of, right? Literally preventing something from going on and also enabling it to keep going on. So, Article 2, right? Of course it says, the typical acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Joe Blandon, yeah. But the main things too that like were brought out in the things today were, besides roadblocksing people, right, causing mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, whole or in parts, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, right? I literally searched up Joe Blandon. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, Anita's very, very witty. Very, very witty. I called him Joe Brahman when he shook hands with Modi. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, they're brothers. So those 3 that I mentioned, right, which are B, C, and D, respectively, are the ones that South Africa held Israel accountable for, right? Again, I understand that the court was never, like, the fact the court said anything and didn't just throw the case out is already more than I ever expected. I literally thought they were just going to throw it out. That literally was my expectation. Joe Sliden, right? Joe Sliden. I mean, he does fall a lot. Like, that's what actually, like that's one thing that, like, all things considered, like, just on a human level, like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like he should have, like, a walker or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, because they just let him, like, run wild, and I'm just like, he can't do that anymore, he got to sit down, like, and like that weird thing he was like, I was like, bro, what are you even saying now? Are we literally going SoundCloud now? SoundCloud presidents now? Like, no. Leave that to Ben Shapiro instead. But Cause I don't know. That was just like he needs help. He needs help. So things like conspiracy, I think is interesting. What is bro yapping about? I have no idea. Like, honestly, I watched that video. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Just give me one quick second. I gotta pull it up now. Now, like now that people are like, oh, what is this? Now I'm like, okay, now I have to find it because now I'm gonna be like, because like legit. Oh, do y'all remember when Vanessa Hudgens had a lip sync against a pork chop? Like, do y'all remember that? When like literally was on RuPaul's Drag Race, literally singing, like, oh my God, I'll pull it up right now. Especially the ICJ president being American, I thought the case was already exactly like I honestly was just like, oh yeah, like she's definitely gonna just throw this out. Like, there's no way. Okay, here we go.
Vanessa, you were fantastic, but I do love a pork chop. Vanessa, Shantae, you stay. Pork chop, my dear, I'm sorry, but you are lunch. Silence.
Okay, so now y'all know the story about the pork chop lip syncing. Oh yeah, this is what I meant to show earlier. Yeah, literally a pork chop. Look, they're literally wearing the yellow stars. Pork chop, yeah, saute away. Yes, Enrique, saute away. Yes, that's so good. That's so good. Saute away. Yes, very true. Yeah. No, that's like, what's so messed up? Oh yeah. About the, sorry, I was thinking about the, yes. Oh, have y'all seen the way how like Ben Shapiro looks at Lil Nas X? If that is that the court or is it in Israel? One quick second. Just want to make sure. This is, want to make sure because this was at the assembly at the UN itself. Okay, now that I don't want to see the pork chop, now the pork chop won't go away. Yeah, here we go. Like, I know people usually don't see this part of the UN, but like literally like this is like you usually see the front, right, with like the green marble, right, the famous podium. But like, yeah, this is where they were sitting at, because they're like out in the back, like, anyway, that matters. I actually need one of those like with nails, like, right, because I have a prima that she's always like, very much like that like that's her thing, and I love it. But yeah, the yellow stars. But yeah, it's this is at the UN in New York. It's so great that all these lawyers and professionals can find time in their day for Nuremberg Gesetze cosplay. I mean, you're not wrong. On one hand, they're trying so hard to justify. I know, right? Like, that's what makes it so disturbing, right? Like, I never thought, like, because it's like, I know, Boy Meets Mini. I know, like, I just cannot imagine, like, the nerve of these people to be like, one, let alone the fact that the state of Israel still hates Holocaust survivors, right? Let alone the fact that they were so horrible to them in the first place when they first got there. But then decides to do something like that, right? Like that's just because they want. It's just horrible, honestly. Okay. I want to make sure I show the Lil Nas part though. Get yourself a man or person, anybody who looks at you like the way how Ben Shapiro looks at Lil Nas does, or the way how he looks at Lil Nas X. Like, you know what I mean? Like, wow, I'm just like, yeah, I'm just like, okay. Oh gosh, I don't like, yeah. Yeah, it's not good for sure. Oh my gosh, where is it? Oh, did y'all see have you guys gotten the Liver King ads? Like everybody I know that lives in California got them, so I'm like pretty sure that it's like at very least a California thing. But has anybody else seen the like weird Liver King ad that they have on Twitter now, where he's like legit eating raw like meatballs? And I don't mean that like as a euphemism. I mean like literally like ground beef, or I don't even know if it's ground beef because the bones he has are like bigger than a cow. Haven't been getting. I want to play it just because it's so disturbed. Like on one hand, to me, I'm just like, what is going on, right? But also, like, why is it like this, right? Okay, here we go. Like,
Primal meatloaf. It's cooked. Nose to tail, horns to hose, bones to blood.
What does horns to hose mean? What is that second part of that? Like, what does that mean? Like, did he say? Like, did he mean hooves? Is that what he's trying to say? This just makes me depressed. Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. It's just really strange. It's just very strange. I'll put it like that. Yeah. He's mispronouncing hooves because he said it like hose, and I'm like, I don't know why you're saying that, bro. Like, lots of people like this influencing. So yes, and you know what I find so like really really bad too is like this whole thing about like seed oils and like let alone everything else. But like if I have to see one more person talk about like literally made up science about how like blah blah blah, it's just like, bro, like you need to just take a nap. Like literally just take a nap. Like you will feel so much better if you would just take a nap and like literally go outside every single day. Because it's too much. It's like way too much. Like the stuff that, yeah, it's just way, way, way too much. I mean, Lamau, we should hijack the school system. Imagine. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I saw that Civil War was trending yesterday or last night, and I just gotta say, like, no. That's all I gotta say. Okay, let's see here. Okay, we gotta listen to this bitch first. Like, we're pioneering this new system based on ancient Japanese tradition of touching grass. Right. Like that's all you have to do is just like say that it's like hyper masculine and raises testosterone or whatever. And they'll be like, they will literally go out there. Like they will literally start eating the grass. I'm not even joking. This first thing off, this dude is so annoying. Matt is annoying as fuck.
You haven't figured it out yet. Let me explain something. Never in the history of the world has there been a genocide that could be ended by a terrorist group handing over hostages and surrendering. See, that's not how genocide works. Hitler wasn't like, hey, hand over our hostages and surrender, Jews, and we'll stop killing you. It's a war. You see what's actually happening.
Do you see how like that actually runs defense for the guy that he mentioned? Like, it's a war. Like, what? Like, yeah, there was a war. It doesn't mean that nothing else was going on.
Is that the Islamist Nazi terrorist group that's constantly telling us that they want to genocide the Jews and destroy Western civilization is trying to genocide the Jews and take over Western civilization.
And like, this also speaks right to like their bullshit too. Like, Western, what does that even mean? Like, what does that even mean at this point? Like, it literally means nothing. Like, you're literally just saying, I want to be a fascist because I'm one of the super special ones that for sure is not going to be, you know. He calls them nuts. I know, it's ridiculous. It's literally, it's Meshugas. It's Meshugas. Like, I'm literally just like, what kind of like Meshuggah Nayelid is this dude? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is this dude doing? A genocide was never performed by someone claiming self-defense. Bestie, that is not what right? Like, oh god, it's
called ideological subversion. That's why there's a bunch of purple-haired girls roaming the streets chanting, there is only one solution, Antifada revolution. They do.
You know, just because of this, purple-haired girls of the world unite. I am like this close to dyeing my hair purple. Like, I'm like, never dyed my hair in my entire life. But like, on one hand, I'm like, purple-haired girls of the world unite. Because apparently that's the next level of SJW. Like, that's even higher than blue-haired. Like, that is literally like purple hair. Like, that's like the third evolution, right? That would be a look. Yeah, I think so. I think it would look cool. Like, I would want to get it like dark, but like I would want to get parts of it dark, but I would want it to like also have like lighter bits too, like fuchsia and like lavender and stuff like that. But I know it would take me so long to do it because I've never done it before. It's not worth it. Just keep your hair natural and healthy. Blue hair is a petty soul gem of SJWs. Purple hair is the grand. Exactly. Like, I think the conflict is really complex, and I have not read much upon it, so I'm kind of leaning towards Palestine. But I'm also a bit indifferent since the historical events that led to this are complex, but okay, I think I get what you're trying to say. But to call... Right. I mean, again, it's literally trying to do the, like, virgin and Chad emoji, and he's literally like, you're the virgin emoji and I'm the Chad one, right? I know that's a very simplistic way to put it, but like that's what happens when they reduce these categories to a simple good and a simple bad, right? Like, that's what you get in response to that, right? It is a very Zoomer way to put it, but you know, I just like that's essentially what's happening here, right? Like all this shows is that the Israelis and the United States has all of the power in this situation, right? And so when they say things like this and try to pretend, right, that the Palestinians could do anything like this, it's just them telling on themselves, right? It's literally just them telling on themselves. Like, I want to submit this to the International Criminal Court as evidence.
Have a really good chance. So wake the fuck up, stop being a bunch of hipster Nazis, and leave these Jews alone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm a power gay at the Sundance Film Festival, and I'm gonna find some gorgeous Jewish producer to hook me up with a TV show, because I have a genius-level IQ, I'm fabulously funny, and I single-handedly ended global anti-Semitism, saving Western civilization. Oh, but what do you...
Okay, I gotta just end it right there because I can't handle this. Okay, Do it. Just simple dialectics between good and evil, where people are indoctrinated and don't view it as a spectrum. Just to say, right, exactly. It doesn't matter, right? Because they know what's happening, right? I mean, yeah, that's definitely what people would say, sure. But is this person like legit? No. He's legit. Like, this is his whole thing. Let alone him using anti-Semitic tropes to argue this, right? Like, literally, like, this is the same thing Ben Shapiro did earlier, right? They have to do anti-Semitism, right? That's the only way that they can even go or perform this task, because otherwise it makes no sense. Otherwise, it just doesn't work, right? Like, why else? Yeah, I mean, yes, it's definitely operating on some level on that way, Mamsie. But it doesn't matter because they know what's happening. Right? I mean, like, again, like, that's why. Oh, I think you have to do the backslash. Well, at least that's how it usually works for me, but I could be wrong. But yeah, like, they know what's happening. They know exactly what is going on. And he is literally trying to be... Here, let me see. There we go. Please make sure to follow our friend of the stream, Current Katie. Oh, you've never seen the backslash? Yeah. Of course, no worries. I think social media is a downfall. I mean, I get the sentiment, but also just thinking through this, what he just said, right? Like, let me show how privileged I am. How the fact I can demonize an entire people and the people that support them, right? Even in the slightest of ways, right? And call them something that is, right, supposed to impeach, right, like what you do, right? That's the point of saying this. I mean, on one level, there are many reasons why he's saying things like this and why he's doing it the way he is, right? Because then it's playing into, many things. But the one thing I just never understood is why they always have to, why when they do this stuff, like with Ben Shapiro, why do they have to do the anti-Semitism? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. It's like there's no other way that they can do it, or is it because the ideology that they uphold is, bad? I'll just put it like that. It's bad. Because I don't know. I think a good argument could be made that it's bad. It's very, very bad. Let me see here. Internalized misogyny is a thing, but I don't see why internalize... No, I mean, I get that, right? I just think, to me, it's, very strange to, pick out tropes that are, very explicitly used against Jewish people, right? And use that almost as a kind of, But I get that, But I said before, Philo... Right, I mean, exactly. I mean, that's definitely where it comes out of. And, I mean... There are many books that talk about this concept exactly, right? That's precisely what you're getting, right? Like, the idea of philo-Semitism as such does not come out of an actual care for the Jewish people. it comes out of a desire to, you know, I don't want to get too deep into that because, again, like I could recommend the book that talks about that later. But actually, I think that we are going to raid SAC app because I need to go make lunch and I need to feed my puppies. So I might stream later, but I'm not sure. So I will see you all soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye.